World Cup, Kim Yong-kwon.
골나갑니다. 정동현입니다. 정동현이 역전을 만듭니다. 2점의 갈비를.
Winners of the AFC Champions League 2020, Ulsan Hyundai.
You're listening to the K-League United podcast, proud partner of Football Nation Radio.
Hello, 안녕하세요. Ryan Walters back in the host chair, remembering how things work after about 2 months of not getting the intro right. I believe we've done it correctly this week, and I am joined virtually this week by a couple of gentlemen that, well, we're shuffling the chairs a little bit. As Matthew said, we have played a little bit of Squid Game recently. Michael's not here this week. We don't need to talk about why. Instead, we got Steve Price.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. And Matthew Binns is here as ever. And
Hello.
Gentlemen, I'm aware that this is kind of like my thing mainly, but the calendar has turned over to October, so I am delighted that it is the month of Halloween, which, again, I'm aware that this is kind of an American thing and that you find English gentlemen don't get into it as much. But the question that I have for you is that if you could go trick-or-treating with any K-leaguer or manager other than Kim Tae-won, you know what? I'll put him back on the table. That's fine. Who would you want to go trick-or-treating with? This could be you as an adult having fun, or if you were a kid going trick-or-treating.
Say I'd have to go with the guy who was in goal for Pohang last week because he had an absolute horror show.
Well done. Yeah, anybody that didn't see that goal highlight, get that one in your face because it's an interesting one. Matthew, trick-or-treating, or you know, a Halloween costume idea?
No, it would be trick-or-treating. It would be with the monster himself, Kim Min-jae. And there's
There you go.
no costume necessary, but certainly intimidating enough. And yeah, probably him. And he's young enough as well to kind of fit the trick-or-treat age bracket, probably.
Yep, there you go. He'll fit in that U12 rule for trick-or-treating as it is. I think, yeah, for me, easy answer that I always have for everything, but I could dress up as Han Solo and then you just get Kim Shin-wook with you. You got the Han and Wookiee connection.
Yeah.
There you go. That's how you do it. He's no longer in K-League, sadly, but we hope that one day he will become a part of the Korean national team set up again, which, speaking of, this is why we three white boys are wearing Korean kits today, because Asian qualifiers resume this week with the Korea Republic hosting Syria. That's happening in 2 days' time at Ansan Stadium, an interesting choice there. And then they're making the long trip, their first away trip of the final round of qualifiers. They're going to face Iran, which is going to be a massive, massive test for them on the 12th. We'll talk about that, and we're going to talk about K-League 2 nearing its end and all of the things going on with that and all the playoff pushes and everything else. And then we do have a really, really full mailbag this week. But before we get into any of that, a quick reminder, speaking of K-League 2, that we do have a really great interview with Kim Tae-won up on kleague.com right now. The man that, should I say lovingly intimidates us? How would you phrase this?
Intimidates us, but we kind of like it.
Okay, sure. Intimidates us, but we kind of like it. If you want a little of that vibe and to understand where that's all coming from, there's a really good interview with him right now and his expectations for his team, Gimcheon Sangmu, and probably what to expect from them in K-League 1 next year. And then also next week, to preview things a little bit, we were going to be shifting gears entirely. Once again, we're going to be talking about AFC Champions League. And Matthew, you have a little bit of fun stuff lined up there, correct?
Well, I do, and Paul does. I've got, from my side of things, there's going to be a written interview with Hong Jong-ho on kleague.com, and then we'll be having Stanislav Ilyichenko. We'll be having some answers from Stanislav Ilyichenko on this podcast next week, so keep tuned with that. And then Paul has lined players up from Pohang and Ulsan as well, so all to look forward to next week in the build-up to the Champions League.
Lovely. Yeah. And 3 out of 4 Korean teams. Here's hoping that we can get 2 Korean teams into the semifinal so we can guarantee that there will be a Korean team into the final against the West. But we'll talk about all that next week. Instead, gentlemen, let us hop right into the topic that we can't ignore this week, can't bury the lead. We're talking about the Korean men's national team resuming their World Cup qualifying campaign. They had 2 home games last time out, and they came away winners in one of them. And they're going to remain at home in an interesting venue this time. Steve, do you have any insight into why they're playing at the WA, why they're down in Ansan for this one?
Yeah, so Seoul World Cup Stadium's pitch is being relayed, so they can't play there. But they want to play somewhere close to Seoul, so it's close to Paju, so they don't have to travel too far. I mean, all the players have to fly into Korea, all the international based players, and some of them arrive, one day before the game almost, so they don't have long to train. So they want to use that time as effectively as possible by playing as close to Paju as they can. And that's why they chose the WA Stadium this time around.
All right. Well, my heart goes out to anybody sitting in the press box there. It's a great little stadium. I like the views there, but the press box, what they did was they ripped out half of the seats up there. No, they didn't rip them out, and they just put like a table over the top, and you really can't quite reach all the way over to them. So it's not my favorite press end, but it is a nice little stadium, and I think it'll be a good one for this anyway. And Steve, Syria, they may not be a powerhouse of Asian football by any stretch of the imagination, but they are not an easy team to break down at all. They will be familiar to fans of the Korean national team because they played the last World Cup campaign, and Korea only managed 1 goal over 2 games. So how should they approach this match?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the same for pretty much all of their matches apart from Iran away, in the way that the teams are going to come and approach Korea. They're all going to play quite defensively, have a lot of guys behind the ball. And I mean, for any team, if they feel they can get a point away against Korea, they will take that as a good result. Even Iran will take that as a good result. So they've got to try and break down the teams. At the same time, you don't want to do what Japan did and lose 1-0 against Oman. So I think that shouldn't be a problem. The way Korea have kind of set themselves up is to basically dominate possession and be safe enough.
What was that?
That's Bento's team talk right there.
Okay. That's what it'll be. That's what it'll be if they don't have a lead by halftime.
Anytime I do any kind of video chats, the cats will come in and just disrupt it. That's what they do. It's in their DNA, I think.
It is their life force.
But yeah, I think the setup's going to be pretty similar to what we saw in the previous 2 games until they took the lead against Lebanon. I think Bento wasn't very happy about how they played after that. Maybe a bit too open, and even though they had the chances to make it 2-0, they also nearly let in an equaliser right at the end. Right. But apart from after they went 1-0 up, before that, they didn't look like they would concede in a million years in either of those 2 games.
Indeed.
So it looks that part looks good. But there's a bit of another worry is if they draw it 0-0, then the pressure's going to really start ramping up.
Well, especially, and that is really not going to be a good situation going to Iran. You could argue that they're the favorites of this group. You would say them or Korea, I would imagine, would be the favorites here. And like you say, if you're going to Iran with only 5 points, that's not necessarily ideal. But Matthew, we talked a little bit about this before we came on. I know you have a rather interesting formation and idea here of how to make this work.
I wouldn't say it was an interesting idea. Well, put me on the spot because people think I'm going to be legitimate with this, and I'm not. But I just go in by like the uproar you get with every single team selection. And I think we should just basically 4-4-2 and just chuck every player the lower side of 24 on there because that's what everybody seems to want. Apparently, I don't. I would like to see Son Heung-min and Hwang Hee-jo up top. I think they both offer two very different things. And the good thing about having Son Heung-min on the pitch is he takes players out of the game, not because of his skill, partly because of his skill, but because people just want to mark him all the time. So surely if he's being marked, there must be space elsewhere. I'd like to see Hwang Hee-chan crammed in there. I know it's a bit difficult. I'd put Hwang Hee-chan out on the left. If you've got Son Heung-min there, left centre forward, they could even interchange. You could put like Son Heung-min moving out left with Hwang Hee-chan cutting inside. I'd like to, but there's lots of players I'd like to see. I'm not saying these are going to be Bento's actual picks because he's disappointed many people apparently every week, every match, which sometimes a bit unjust. But I'd like to see Kang Sang-woo get a shot at left back. I think he's proven his worth in the K-League with his assists. So I'd like to see him get a bit of a trial run out here at left back. Yeah,
I love that you're building left to right, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, in the centre, I'm not 100% sure you have. I was shocked to discover that Lee Jae-sung is considered old by the Korean national team fans this week. I remember when we were like, oh, he's the future of Korean football. And now people are just saying he's 29, he's old, get him out the squad, we need somebody younger. And I just don't think Lee Jae-sung has something to offer. He may not have had the best of time last time out, but I'd like to see him in the centre, perhaps with Hwang In-bom. I mean, Paek Sung-ho's got in the squad. I don't know whether he's good enough to start. He's been very good for Jeonbuk recently. I'm sure he will get time here, and I'm sure he'll get a chance to prove himself. But as a starter, no. I mean, Steve can give a more nuanced idea of perhaps how Korea will line up, rather than me just playing FIFA effectively here with the names that I've got available.
I love I just wanted you to say that you would put him out there in a 4-4-2.
I
just wanted
you
to say that.
Yeah, Lee Dong-jun on the right, Hwang Hee-chan on the left, Son Heung-min, Hwang Hee-jo up top. Prove me wrong. Argue me.
Done and dusted. There you go. I hope you're watching, Mr. Bento, because everything's figured out for you there. Legitimately, though, I think to stick with Syria for a minute, and then we'll move on because we're not going to be able to come back in time to cover the matches before they make the trip to Tehran. Steve, to me, one of the key players to breaking down opposition defense and just to kind of making things move in general, and Matt, you did jokingly, but you did mention him as Hwang In-bom, and there was a stat graphic put out this week on the Asian Cup social that showed he is he's tied for the most passes so far. He is the cog in the central of this midfield, and to me, we've let Pete rail on about him on here. I think he's still got some ways to go in some aspects, but I do think that he connects things really well, and is always, more importantly, in my opinion, he's always looking to move things forward. And that's what I really like about him in that position, is that he can play defensively and he can shield, but he's always looking to drive things forward from the middle of the pitch as well, which as a K-League fan, we don't see all that often. But that, to me, he's the person that I think is going to really help this click. Is there anybody that you have in mind that's going to help break down this very, very stingy Syrian defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tactics in both games and the key players are going to be totally different. So yeah, I think in that Syria game, Hwang In-bom's going to be key with his passing to try and break them down, and then it just depends on the other players actually taking their chances, because Korea have created enough chances in both the Iraq game and the Lebanon game to score more goals than they did.
For sure.
Players have to take those chances. It doesn't matter how great your tactics are or anything like that. If players go and miss open goals, there's not much you can do.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
Yeah. In the second game, though, I think Hwang Hee-chan is going to be key. Him and Son Heung-min using their pace, getting in behind the defense. I think that's going to be a very exciting game to watch, because Iran are at home. They can't sit back. They're going to have to move forward and create that space. And then I think you're going to get to see kind of maybe the better performances from Son Heung-min and Hwang Hee-chan that they normally can't do, because they're kind of such speed-based players, but they don't have that space behind the defense in a lot of their games. So I'm looking forward to the Iran game.
Well, that doesn't good, because one of my questions was going to be, if you're Bento, do you park the bus in this one? And I guess what you're saying is that no, you would just go ahead and go out and go for this game.
No, I think if you look at the squads that's selected, that's not a squad that has parking the bus in mind.
It's true.
It's a squad where they're going to play pretty much in their same style, trying to keep hold of the ball and not do anything too risky. But at the same time, it's certainly not going to be parking the bus.
Well, and then that does also lead into the other question that I have for the Iran match, is that how do you neutralize somebody like Mehdi Taremi? And like, do you mark him 1v1? Do you try to zonally mark him out of the game? Or do you just kind of admit that you're going to have to score more than one goal if you want to win this game?
I think you try to dominate the game as much as you can. And if Iran don't have the ball, they can't pass it to him. So try and have as much possession as you can, and then when you don't have possession, make sure your players are in good positions to stop Iran from moving the ball around and making those key passes. Mm-hmm. It's not unless you're playing like Lionel Messi or something. It's not really about marking that guy out of the game. It's more about your 11 players against theirs.
Yeah, looking at him in what he's been doing in Portugal recently, I think he's got the second most touches in the penalty box. Getting the ball to him in there is obviously, well, that's what Korea's got to stop, as Steve says. But he also tends to break the line a lot. He tends to just catch teams on the counter, and you've got to have a player who can track back. I mean, I don't suggest man marking for the reason Steve says, and I also think that Steve's right that first port of call should be stop the supply in the first place. But I do think Kim Min-jae, when he's done trick or treating, could probably keep tabs on him. He's done jobs like this before at Jeonnam, and I think that he would be able to be the player that could make sure that he doesn't get through that Korea defense. Yeah,
I like that. The trick or treating only happens at the end of the month, by the way. It's not a month long, so it's a month long celebration for me in my heart for Halloween, but it's actually only one day you get to go trick or treating. But anyway, speaking of tricks or treats, gentlemen, I like that one. These matches, are we going to see a trick or a treat here? Matthew, how many points out of these two games is the Korean men's national team going to walk away with?
I think 4.
4?
I think they'll beat Syria, and I think it'll be a draw in Iran.
I think they'd take that. Steve?
Yeah, I think they had their trick last time around, so I'm going to say they're going to have a treat this time and get 4 points.
Same win at home, draw. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
the safe way to say that, right?
It's
rather than do it the other way around.
It's really difficult to disagree with you guys on that one. I mean, just because I think they know that they pretty much have to win that match against Syria, so I think they find a way to get that done. It might just be 1-0. It probably will only be 1-0 given the matchups that we've seen between these two sides before. But I think they'll find a way to get that done because they have to, because like we were saying at the beginning there, you can't make your first trip away, and you can't make that trip to Iran of all places without as many points as you want, and they're already a few behind there. But I'm hoping that you're right, Steve. I hope this is a very entertaining affair next week on the 12th. It'll be 10:30 p.m. Korea time. I just forever have etched in my mind a 0-0 that we all went to here in Seoul against Iran. That was a match that happened, and that's what we'll leave that one at. And we'll talk about that one another day.
That's a very different Iran team.
Yes.
Carlos Queiroz coming to Korea with his teams are impossible to score against. Korea didn't look like scoring at all, and as soon as Iran got the player sent off, they put everybody behind the ball. Yeah, I think it's going to be a very different match from that one.
Let's hope so. All right, we'll see how it plays out, and we are going to break from that and come back and talk about the party that is K-League 2 after this quick break. We'll be right back.
FNR is a revolutionary football-dedicated digital platform, the first of its kind in Australia. It provides a 24/7 live online radio platform experience, podcast hub, and acts as a content provider for TV, radio, and digital. Having reached millions of listeners and football fans since launching, FNR is accessible worldwide via its website or app, providing a platform to discuss, debate and celebrate the world game. We are your voice of football, FNR Football Nation Radio.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Walters, joined by Steve Price and Matthew Binns. And gentlemen, we finally get to talk about the thing that we all want to talk about. We're talking about K-League 2. We're skipping K-League 1 this week because they're on break, so they don't get our attention. Instead, we're doing 2 segments of K-League 2 because why not? Because that's what's happening right now, and that's what's going to be happening for this month. So we're getting you ready for it. And we're getting you ready for it by talking about the weekend that was in round 32. Boy, there weren't a ton of goals, and there were a lot of draws. But here, let's talk about what happened. I think importantly for the title race, Gimcheon Sangmu, they eked out a 1-0 win over Ansem Greeners. That was a very, very important result for them. Seoul Eland and Jeonnam FC drew 1-1, as did FC Anyang and Jeonnam Dragons, which could have had title implications. Those were the Saturday matches. And then on Sunday, Daejeon Hana Citizen, boy, they just can't get past this team this year. They drew 1-1 with Bucheon FC 1995. And the only other victory of the weekend came as Busan iPark beat Jeonnam Asan 2-1. Matthew, let's get started with you. What was your main takeaway from the weekend that was?
Well, I think, first off, I think the playoffs are going to be a lot of fun. I caught Daejeon versus Bucheon, but I also tuned into the highlights for Anyang, Jeonnam, and this is assuming Gimcheon's going to win the league, which they are, let's be honest.
Yeah, they are.
The draw. They may have been boring on paper, the results, but both those games are end to end. It has the makings of an interesting playoff race. But yeah, I'll stick to Daejeon because I believe you're probably more in a better place to talk about Jeonnam. Or you might not be in a good place at all to talk about Jeonnam. People rarely are. But yeah, no, I was really impressed with the Daejeon versus Bucheon match. It was a lot of fun, I thought, this one. End to end, both teams just driving forward. Bucheon doing a lot of work on the counter here. There was no lethargic passing build-up players I've got used to watching at Jeonju World Cup Stadium every week. Is Bucheon, yeah, they were really encouraging. They took a lot of shots from range. It's what Bucheon have liked to do this season. They like to just wait for an opening and just take a shot. It's partly why they're bottom, because perhaps they're not getting the amount of goals they need to, but they're perhaps better than their position suggests. First goal, it was a great curling low cross in from the left by Cho Hyun-taek, and it came into Lee Han, who's on loan from Jeonbuk. He scored there, his 4th of the season. I think Cho Hyun-taek as well, he's on loan at Ulsan as well. So these are 2 young players at Bucheon at the moment. Might not be with them next season, so any promise there could lose, might not have it to continue into next season. And Daejeon, they were throwing everything at them in the second half. It was really exciting stuff from Daejeon. They do look good, and not just because of the retro kits that they're wearing at the moment. In the end, it was a late penalty for Daejeon. It was the slightest of touches by Song Hon-min. I've said that really slowly, just for anybody seeing us in a Korean kit thinking, hang on, what's he doing over there? Yeah, no, Bucheon Song Hon-min had a tackle on Masatoshi Ishida. The VAR, I didn't think was that conclusive, to be honest. No. It's the faintest of touches, if any. But Masatoshi Ishida, he stood up, took the penalty, and it was saved. Goalkeeper Chae Cho-won diving the correct way, and Bucheon clearing it. But referee blew the whistle. He was off the line, apparently, and the second one was converted to give Daejeon a lifeline in these playoffs. Stats, though, looking at it, Daejeon had 16 shots, 8 on target to Bucheon's 13 or 7 on target. And the XG certainly favoured Daejeon with a 3.27 XG to a 1.22. Also, Daejeon dominated possession as well. But this is the kind of way we've expected Bucheon to play, as we said. They kind of like to drive forward with the ball, just get into any area of danger, and then just boom, shoot from afar. Like that's how they do it. And sometimes they win. And cause some shock upsets, but more often than not, they do lose. But yeah, one player I'd like to point out, and this isn't from this game, it was more of a, this is something I've had left over from a week or two back, and I didn't get to it last week, but Park Chang-jun, Bucheon, he's no goals for the left-sided midfielder this weekend, but he's currently third in the Golden Boot race in the K-League 2 with 12 goals this season, plus an assist to his name. He ranks 27th for shots taken. But where Am Byung-jun has 112. So if you want to just kind of see how many opportunities Am Byung-jun is getting compared to Park Chang-jun, well, that's partly due to position, partly due to the team he's playing for. But yeah, he has the highest accuracy in the league. So when he gets his shot away, he usually does score it. And he signed to Bucheon at the beginning of the season. He's only 24 years old. He had a disappointing spell at Jeonnam last season, and he didn't really make waves at Gangwon FC where he started his career. If he was playing for a team higher in the league, I think we'd be speaking more about him. But because he's turning out for Bucheon every week, I think we kind of overlook him every week. And I just think it's a player that probably deserves highlighting when all things are done. He probably will be the player that will get highlighted for Bucheon come the Christmas episode. But yeah, just a player I'd like to point out. And against Daejeon Park, had arguably a better game than he did in those which he scored in recently. He was more on the wing on this one, but he had a higher passing accuracy, made more defensive duels with a higher success rate, and he was involved in a lot more aerial duels, a lot more successful as well in those. So, good player, promising young player in the K-League 2, turning out for Bucheon every week, and perhaps not getting the spotlight he deserves. So there it is.
Sounds like he needs to go to a massive club that plays down south if they don't get promotion this year. That's right, Busan, you can have him. Anyway, speaking of Busan, that's the team I'm talking about. That was my takeaway from the weekend because, as I said, there were a lot of 1-1 draws there. Busan was not one of them, and they are getting very, very close to the playoff line that my Jeonnam Dragons are currently propping up, trying to keep themselves separate from the chasing pack. And Jeonnam did manage what would usually be a very massive point in Anyang. I mean, I know a draw is never really going to be a 1-1 draw is never going to be super exciting in a lot of ways, especially when Jeonnam's goal came with a penalty with like the last kick of the game. But it is a massive point. It proves that they can play against Anyang, which they're going to have to. But it does keep them winless in 4 with only 3 goals scored, and it's 1 win in 10. 1 win in 10 for the Dragons in league play. They did get that massive FA Cup win in that stretch, but it's not been outstanding, but it hasn't been terrible either. They do have 6 draws in that stretch as well. So just the 3 losses in a 10-match streak, it's, it's kind of how it's been for them. Balotelli's gone a little bit quiet as well. He does have 3 match-winning goals for the Dragons this year, which is the 3rd most in the league, and it kind of proves how vital he is to the Dragons actually winning some games here. Hopefully, Lee Jung-ho's penalty will get him going, but the Dragons have edged out 2 1-0 victories over Busan this season, and they also lost 2-1 after taking the lead, which is interesting because Busan have nabbed 11 points after falling behind, largely because Am Byung-jun is not human. He has scored 21 goals this season. That is back-to-back seasons with 20 goals for him. I think it's back-to-back seasons, actually. I'll have to look that one up at the break, but he's just absolutely outstanding yet again. I think Gangwon FC are probably kicking themselves for not looking past that little knee injury that he had going into the season, but we say that every single week. Comparatively, the Dragons have only picked up 6 points when trailing, so this is what concerns me about Busan right now. And they've got back-to-back wins, and as we know in K-League 2, that can carry you a really long way. But it's worrying stuff, especially because they welcome Bucheon FC at home this weekend, a team that they've done all right against this year, whereas the Dragons welcome Seoul Eland. I'll talk about that more in a little bit, but my main takeaway from the weekend was just that the playoffs seemed very secure. Last time I was on, we were talking about Jeonnam being 7 points back from the Dragons, and now we're talking about Busan being 5 points back, and it feels like that gap is just narrowing, and I don't want to see a repeat of when Bucheon won their way in to end the season a couple of years ago, because I think it would come at the expense of the Dragons. I don't see Daejeon slipping up that much. So, But anyway, Surprise, surprise. I was focused on the Dragons. Steve, I saved you for last year because we saved the best for last, but also because you kind of had more of you were saying like a general takeaway of the past month of K-League
Right.
2.
Yeah. So I just think back at last season when it went to like the final couple of games, and it was so close, that kind of fight for the playoffs. There were so many teams in there, and it was coming down to goal difference and things like that. And that was really exciting for a lot of teams. I think this season maybe it's not quite as exciting, in that there's quite a big gap between each of the teams from the top down to like fifth. There's a few points there. Nothing can be really decided in like one game. So I feel like the next few weeks are going to be there's going to be a few dead rubbers in there, and a few games that aren't going to be great. But there's going to be that really big game on the 17th of October when Jeonnam take on Busan. I think that's what I think everybody's gonna be watching, because that's probably going to be pretty decisive in who gets that final playoff spot.
And it's going to go great. It's going to be amazing.
Well, at home, so there is that going for you.
Maybe that's not necessarily the best for us. That does lead into what to watch this weekend. I already touched on it a little bit, but Matthew, what do you have up ahead in K-League 2 this weekend?
Yeah, so with Anyang drawing and Gimcheon winning, the scenario that Michael and I teased in last week's podcast has come to fruition. Yeah, that is Gimcheon can claim the title with a win in Anyang this weekend. Gimcheon and Anyang, they've both been performing to expectations, statistically speaking. Gimcheon, they have the highest average possession in the league, though, where Anyang are the third lowest. They kind of play into each other's styles a bit. Gimcheon loves to keep hold of the ball, where Anyang likes to win it back and break quickly. So two contrasting styles that could make for a good, entertaining match. Gimcheon, being the Army, are the most trigger happy in the division with 438 shots, with Anyang, the pacifists, at second from bottom with 334. Gimcheon are also far more accurate, which you hope they would be, being the Army, but no more military puns, I promise. Anyang, they're far better defensively, though, and second for interceptions in the league, where Gimcheon are last. Fourth for aerial duels, where Gimcheon are last. First for losing the ball, though, where Gimcheon are second from last, as we suggested. Gimcheon like to keep hold of this ball. The previous results from these two, well, it's been 2 goalless draws and then 4-2 to Anyang in July. That was in Gimcheon. But the result doesn't paint the whole picture. It was an incredibly waterlogged pitch to people who can remember that match. It was more swimming than football. But Anyang, they played in a 4-1-4-1. They didn't have Jonathan Moyer for this game either, whereas Gimcheon started that one with a 4-2-3-1, but had to go to a 4-4-2 after going not 1, not 2, but 4 goals behind. And Anyang, they made an impressive 61 interceptions in this match. They just kept this dogged determination up on Gimcheon to just try and get something off this unpredictable playing service. Any ball that just either wouldn't bounce in this case, or something that skimmed or somebody slipped, Anyang was just there to capitalize on it. Gimcheon came back with 2 late consolation goals, but it was far too late to get anything on this pitch. Interestingly, despite scoring 4 goals, the expected goals for Anyang in that match was 0.8. Where Gimcheon had 1.54. What that means is Anyang, they only took 7 shots in the whole game to Gimcheon's 12, and 2 of their goals were from outside of the area. One was a well-worked assist from in and past the square in it, and the other was from a tight angle that's usually quite difficult to score from, but slipped underneath the keeper. So Anyang have beaten Gimcheon here, and perhaps that kind of playing style worked in their favour in that kind of condition, this kind of tackling and just breaking away, and Gimcheon not able to play their usual style of football. Unfortunately, the weather forecast at the moment is glorious sunshine on Saturday. So Kim Tae-wan might slap a bit of suntan lotion on his head and be celebrating come final whistle.
Well, he and I will have the same thing going on this weekend. I think I'm going to make the trip up to Anyang for that one, just to see if the shield's there, just in case. I believe they'll win on that
doing the
one.
full sunbathing thing with it there underneath to bounce the rays off.
Isn't that what it's for? Is that not
I
what
thought
it's
so.
for?
Yeah, I don't know. John Book's never won it.
Not yet, but
Not
there's
yet.
still time. You could still get down there and get it. Speaking of teams from the Jola region, where the best food in the country is, I'll always say it because it's true. The thing to look out for this weekend is kind of involving the Dragons, but again, more so, I'm keeping my eye on Busan this weekend just because they are the hot team right now, and this is when you want to be the hot team in K-League 2. And I'm curious if they're going to be able to edge closer to the playoffs. If results go their way, they could be within 2 points after this weekend. Jeonnam, as I mentioned, do host Seoul Eland. They've done all right against the Leopards this year. They have 2 1-1 draws, and then they do have a 3-0 win over the other team from Seoul. Hi, Michael. And the bad news for the Dragons, however, is that in 10 matches played, they only have 2 wins against Seoul Eland. So this feels like another draw for the Dragons, which is music to the ears for Busan I Park, who host Bucheon FC 1995, a team that, look, I mean, it's K2. Bucheon's going to do what they're going to do, and they can upset anybody on their day, and they have upset every single team in this league this season at one point or another. So it's not necessarily a gimme, but you would have to favor Busan in this one. They also have 2 draws and a win, and only 4, however, of Busan's 11 wins this season have come at home. So that's working against them. But I'm Byung-jun. So I think they're gonna be okay in that one. So really, to me, the pressure is on the Dragons to match Busan's result or better it. And again, I'm just a little worried about that considering their record against Seoul Eland, where they mainly draw. But that's what I'm looking out for this weekend. Steve, what should the people watch this weekend in K-League 2?
Yeah, I think in K-League 2, definitely that the Jeonnam clash with Seoul Eland, whether they can, whether the nerves are going to start to get to them, because there's always one team in the playoffs where, it comes to the end of the season and they spend so much time looking over their shoulder that they forget to do the business on the pitch and end up dropping out of the playoffs on the last day due to goal difference or something like that. But the game for me would be very crucial in deciding who could be in K-League 2 next season, and that would be the K-League 1 clash, Gangwon against Jeju, which is also Gangwon have 3 games in hand at the moment, and if they can get 3 or 4 points from those 3 games, then the battle at the bottom of the K1 is going to suddenly look very tight.
Yeah. That's I like that tie-in there. I like that tie-in to the teams that could be in K2 next year, and I don't think Gangwon wants to go back down there. They've managed to stay up for a while, and we're even flirting with ACL for a minute. And Matthew, I did, of course, listen to the pod last week. I took many notes on transitions, by the way.
Thank you.
Fine work. Some of your best work. And I was also listening when you were talking about, I lost my point now because of that car going by. That's what I get for transitions. Too focused on calling you out for trying to call me out when I wasn't around. And you said Byung-Soo Ball's dead. It ain't dead. It ain't dead yet. It ain't dead yet. Once those game in hands are made up, then we'll talk about it. But for now, long live Byung-Soo Ball. And I know that if Ross is listening, he'll be very excited about that as well. So we're going to take a quick break. Speaking of transitions, there's a good one for you. We're going to take a really quick break, and we're going to come back. And we've had a couple of questions come in live. The one that just threw me there, we'll get to that in the mailbag. That and a whole bunch more. We will be right back.
Fans, we want to hear from you. You're encouraged to email KLU at info@kleagueunited.com or tweet at KLeague United with any questions, comments or reactions. Or follow us on Facebook to ask directly during one of our live shows.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Walters. And this week, sadly, for those of you watching the live stream, no Eulji Lewis dog. We'll fit it in at the end. Anyway, Matthew, we've had quite a few comments come in as we're streaming here, and I want to get started with one that came in from Lex on Facebook asking, where is Jonathan for Gwangju? But I believe you covered this last week, y'all.
Yeah, we did. Peter did some detective work down in Gwangju, doing a bit of a Columbo, just doing a last minute. Oh, hang on a second, and just going back to the media officer to try and just one more thing. And Peter managed to prize out the information that Jonathan has got a hamstring injury still. He could be back after the split. Emphasis on the could. We don't know. He's apparently forever very close to being back, but he's not back. And as Peter pointed out on the show last week, even if he was to come back at this point, Gwangju are embroiled in a relegation scrap. Do you really want a striker who's not match fit to try and drag you over that safety line? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that's a tough one there. We had just one more come in live stream. This is from Zihezebe, asking if we would cover more of the lower division. So this was a K2 special, and that's about as low as we go for the podcast. We do love K3, K4, and lower. We love them. We love them. But we're stretched. We're stretched as it is with 22 teams. So we're going to leave it there and just cover the second division. And I see that it's mainly about Gimcheon Sangmu, a team that we love here on this show. And another plug. Sorry, I was going to say another plug for Paul's interview with Kim Tae-won. So if you're a Gimcheon Sangmu fan or a former Sangju Sangmu fan, as this is, then go ahead and check that out. Matthew.
Yeah, I'd like to answer the question that has just come in there from Hasabi about Sangju City kicking out the Sangju team. Well, what it is, kicking out the Sangmu team. Well, the Sangmu team is only ever in place for 10 years in a city, and it's partly done for the military benefit, but it's also done as some cities try and use it as a trial run to see whether they want to have their own football club. Gwangju did it, and then when Sangmu moved on after 10 years, Gwangju formed their own citizen football club. When time was up with Sangju decided not to take the option to set up a citizen club. They didn't feel there was a need to. There was talk there was going to be a Sangju City. Didn't come to fruition in the end. And Sangmu moved on to their next location, which is now Gimcheon, obviously getting relegated in the process. But yeah, it's the Sangmu thing. It's only a 10-year deal. So in another 9 seasons' time, we'll be talking about where the Sangmu team are going to be moving next. Maybe that big old stadium in Yongin that doesn't get used for anything.
That's how we'll celebrate the 14-year anniversary of the podcast. We'll see how people still definitely want to hear.
It'll still be the same jokes. Still be the same jokes. Kim Tae-uk on the I forgot his name. How could I do? He's only been gone for a season and a half. Kim Shin-uk on the outro. All them. We'll still be thinking Kim Tae-won will still be in charge of Sangmu as well.
Of course, indeed. All right. Speaking of the mailbag and the questions we'll be answering, let's hop into the actual mailbag. Matthew, get in there.
All right, we've got Suwon FC fan in on Twitter. Which K-League team do you think should try to sign An Byung-jun?
There was some talk on the Twitters about An Byung-jun going to K-League. I assume most people meant K-League 1. Steve, is there a team in K1 that you think should sign him?
I think pretty much all the teams in K-League 1 should sign him, or at least try to. I think it might come down to money at the end of the day. So the K-League 1 teams without much money, Gwangju, for example, even though they probably won't be, they might not be there next season, but the teams without much money probably don't have much of a chance. I think it's going to go to one of the top sides, even if he's not a starter for them. I think he'll be going to one of those sides in the ACL.
Oh,
yeah, I was about to say kind of the opposite because I'm not 100% sure on the ruling. So in K-League, An Byung-jun is registered as a South Korean, despite being a North Korean international. But if he was in the ACL, would he come under South Korea as a domestic player, or would he come under because North Korea has its own teams in the AFC Cup competitions? Would then that mean that he'd be in the quota the foreign player quota if he was playing in the Champions League. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure there's examples in the past. I'm just not brushed up. If anyone knows,
it depends. I mean, depends if they want to play him in the ACL. But I mean, in terms of the budgets, he'll be going to a team that can afford him and can afford to take him off Busan.
Mm-hmm. True.
Those teams are generally the teams that are in the ACL, whether or not he gets to be part of their ACL squad or not.
Yeah.
Now, there's a team that could be an ACL next year that could use him. Suwon FC might want him back. I mean, Lars is absolutely killing it this year, so they don't need him per se. But wouldn't that be an interesting reunion there? Yeah, I mean, I think a K1 club should probably take a flyer on him. But hey, like I was saying in the K2 segment, Busan aren't done yet this season, so maybe they'll make their way up. I don't necessarily see that happening, but if not, then you would have to imagine that they would want to cash in, because that's kind of become Busan's thing, is cashing in when they can. And, hey, got to stay afloat somehow. But they are not afraid to sell players, and I don't think they would be afraid to sell him this summer, or this winter, I should say, if teams come calling. Maybe Jeonnam, if they manage to stay up, would be a good fit, in my opinion. But they don't have a massive budget, but they definitely could use some help up top.
Yeah. Anyway, next out the mailbag, it's James McCone on Facebook. Why are Daejeon playing at their old stadium?
The same reason everybody plays away from their main stadium, turf being laid down.
Yeah,
that's just a thing. Like, this is one of the bizarre things in Korean football. I've never seen this in MLS. We have gridiron, we have NFL football lines on the field sometimes, and currently with the best team in the league, the New England Revolution, they have football lines on their pitch. So that's fun. But I've never seen teams have to leave and play in another stadium near as often as we see in K-League. Like Suwon FC are playing at the World Cup Stadium right now. Matthew, you and I went to a game at the Jeonju Civic Stadium because the World Cup Stadium was having its pitch relayed. The Dragons had to play in Suncheon for a long time because they were having their pitch relayed. FC Seoul is going to play at Jeomseo this season because they're having their pitch relayed. Like, it's weird to me how often teams are just booted out for this.
Right, but at the same time, you've played so many games in Korea, but how many games have you played on grass? I can't imagine it's as many, if any.
I can count them on this hand.
It's hard to grow grass pitches in Korea because of the climate. It's not really suited well for having perfect quality turfs. I think that's probably quite a lot of the reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird one, but that's why they're not there.
It's also worth mentioning that the Hanbat, where Daejeon are playing, is getting knocked down at the end of the year. They're going to be turning it into a new baseball stadium, according to Paul. So there's probably also that. It probably also tied in quite nicely. That's why they are wearing the retro kits, if people are wondering. So it probably ties in quite nicely to play out there, and hopefully Daejeon can celebrate something at the end of the season while seeing that stadium out.
I figured they were wearing the retro kits because they were super cheap and decided not to change their kits this season. And they came out with the retro one and they were like, this is just our home kit now. It's not the 2021 kit. It's a retro kit that we came out with halfway through the season. I love it, by the way. I think it's a great kit, but they should definitely just keep wearing that and not the I love a half and half, but not for 2 seasons.
All right. Anyway, next question is Chris Edwards via Instagram stories. Which teams in K3 deserve to join the K-League 2?
Steve, you want to start this one?
I feel like there's a lot of teams, even in the K-League 2, who don't really have enough fans to almost warrant a team. And then when you go to the K-League 3, it's there's nobody going to their games a lot of the time. I think that's a big thing. You've got to have I think a decent enough support, and if any team can get a decent number of fans and a number of fans that's equivalent to teams towards the bottom of the K2, then they should be given a chance to join the K2.
It's interesting because today it's been reported about Pyeongtaek. They're actually struggling to pay wages and could actually be banned from the K3 league. And I think that that would be one of the main issues, really. It's any team that could financially support themselves to go up to the K League 2, because it is, turning teams professional at that point. And if teams can't sustain themselves at K3 level, then it makes it kind of difficult. So yeah, first it'd come down to finances for me.
I think this is, well, to me, it's not a chicken and an egg situation. I think the pyramid has to open up if we're going to see fans come into these stadiums and if we're going to see teams care about it, because fans aren't going to be as into a third division team that's stuck in the third division forever. If you win this division, then congratulations, you win this division and you get a nice little trophy and nothing else. You don't get promoted. So for me, I think we would see more ambition. We would see more people turning up to the games, certainly at the end of the season when everybody cares all of a sudden. That would be great. Like, right now, Jeonnam City, they're in first in the division. If they were going to be getting promoted, then people, I think, would be coming to these games. And we've seen a lot of these teams in FA Cup. I think there is talent there. I think there's infrastructure in place in places like Hwasong. They're not having a great season this season, but I think there's somebody that could come up. Gimhae is another club that we see do well in FA Cup all the time. And let's get the Busan Derby going. Let's get the Transportation Corporation. Let's get them up into K2. But for me, if I had to pick one, I just pigeonholed myself there. If I had to pick one, I would say Hwasong. Why not? Just because I love their logo, because it's absurd.
I would say Hwasong are probably the team that shouldn't be.
Their stadium's miles away, isn't it?
Most of the people who live in the city of Hwasong live closer to the Suwon World Cup Stadium and to Songnam Stadium than they do to that stadium.
I will change my answer to Gangneung City, just because I love a trip over to Gangneung. So get them up into K2 and give me a reason to go over there twice
I'll
as
second
often.
that.
I think it depends as well, like on what the teams want.
Exactly.
Like they're not teams the supporters want. Some of the supporters follow K3 league teams, K4 league teams, because it is a different product to the K League, and people prefer that. So yeah, any club that would be turning professional probably should take their fans into consideration. Just for the hypothetical, though, I'm taking it too seriously. Just for the hypothetical, Mokpo would be a fun one. Gimpo, they have the airport derby with Incheon.
Mm-hmm.
Great little matchup.
I think it's got to be maybe a team where people wouldn't just support a different team. So someone like Mokpo, there's no other team's really that close. Gwangju's quite a long way away from there. Jeonnam's quite a long way away from there. So they're not going to be like competing with other teams for fans. Whereas if you had Gimpo, they're right next to Bucheon, they're right next to Incheon. So if you're living there, it's easy enough to support a different team. So I think, maybe the teams which don't have any teams in the K League, so people who live in those cities could still watch the K League, they would be the ones which would probably, for me, deserve a shot more than others.
Gangneung gets it, and they kick Gangwon out. Let's go. Chuncheon only for them.
Be versing each other in the K2 next year, wouldn't they? Anyway. I had a taxi driver, just going off topic, I had a taxi driver in Yangyang, and he was just going off on one about Gangwon. He was saying how bad they were. He was from Pohang, it turned out, but he was just like, they're awful. And they don't stick around either. They just keep moving about, and they're awful. Yeah. So there's my very, very short marketing research into what the locals think.
Well, at least he knows they exist. That's more than the last taxi driver I had in Gangneung.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but no, they're not that bad, everyone. You're thinking of watching Gangwon, they're not that bad sometimes.
Byungsu Ball is alive.
Well, it's just whether you want it to be alive in this current format. Anyway, right, moving on. Get past this.
Take us out of this trench, man. What's next?
Satoija on Instagram stories. Who will be Ansem Greene's new coach?
I mean, I got an answer, but I'll Kim Byung-soo. I mean, maybe. I mean, he might be out of a job soon. I don't know. I don't know if Park Jin-sop's going to be looking to go down to K2. I don't know if Ansem will be the team for him. I feel like FC Seoul wasn't the best fit for him. He did wonders with Gwangju, obviously, and it feels like Seoul is a leap too far for a lot of the managers that end up trying to take over that job. But I think he deserves another shot, and Ansan could do worse, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't really got any suggestions there, to be honest.
Hong Sun-hong.
Hong Sun-hong, well,
he's a little busy now.
He's a little busy now, but maybe Korean under-23 national team fans maybe would like him to be at Ansem Green's. I don't know. Steve say nothing. I know.
Run a competition for football managers, see who wins it, and give them the job. There you go.
Hey.
That's how the name Greeners came about. So
Right.
Right. We'll move on. Now this one has got a combination of letters and numbers, although I think it's supposed to spell although.
Yeah.
So A1TH0UG9G via Instagram stories. Which teams will get promoted? Nice easy one.
I love how easy the question was compared to the handle that you're struggling with there. Well, I mean, Gimcheon Sangmu, I think we all agree is going to win the league. Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Okay, Steve, you hesitated there. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Anyang's going to do this. Let's do this. Steve? I'll stick with you on this one then. Who do you think's who's gonna win the playoffs?
Songnam.
Well, okay, not the final playoff. Two playoffs.
Yeah. I think it's probably not going to be Jeonnam. That's what I'm going to say.
Rude. I'm sitting right here. Rude. Matthew, who's winning the K2 playoffs?
I don't. Anyang have looked good this season, but I think Daejeon might just do it. They might not do it against the K1 team. I'm not saying that, but I think they might get to the playoff final.
I mean, obviously, in my heart, you're both wrong, and it's going to be Jeonnam. But I worry about their ability to score goals. You know, I just excuse me. I don't see them doing that when they have to in a playoff game like that. I think they've done a tremendous job at not losing away from home this year, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to make it through the playoffs. I honestly think, I think I'll agree with you, Matthew. I think Daejeon are going to be the team that get it done. And then I'll go one step further and say they're coming back to the first division. Paul Neat, go ahead and pop open that bubbly.
I think you've just jinxed it for him.
Did I? Is that what I doing it on purpose?
Just cursing this podcast right now. Anyway, we'll move on before we jinx Daejeon any further. Outdoor Wayguk, also known as John Christian to us at the podcast, and the last voice you hear every time this episode finishes with his cheers for Kim Shin-uk. Will life go on if Seoul aren't relegated?
I think his answer is no. Steve, you and I, back in the day, which sadly was like 2 years ago, back in the day when we could go to games together, you and I went to a lot of FC Seoul games. Will life go on if they don't get relegated?
I think John needs to watch a bit of FC Seoul. I mean, they're playing some really nice football now that they've changed their manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is a surprise for the K-League because there's a lot of teams that don't play nice football. So it's quite refreshing to see the way. And also how badly Seoul were playing earlier this season when I think even FC Seoul fans almost wanted them to go down.
Yeah.
But they're playing some nice football. So, John, get watching FC Seoul.
Don't think he'll be doing that. Don't listen to him, John. Don't listen to him. Right. Finally, it's our very own Paul Neat via Twitter. He's got a question for you, Steve. And he wants to know, why do people keep saying Bento's in the hot seat?
When he says people, he means the Korean media, I think. Mm-hmm. He seems to be saying that when they won, if they win 10-0, they'll be like, it's only 10-0. Why didn't you win 11-0? He's in the hot seat. When I ran the stats through, and I think you need about 15 or 16 points from the group they're in now to probably qualify. Korea have got 4 at the moment, 4 from 2 games, which is an average of 2 points a game, which is normally enough to win whatever league you're in. So I think there's not too much to worry about at the moment. So anybody saying he's in the hot seat right now is probably being a bit dramatic. If results do change, then maybe he will be in the hot seat, and maybe those people will be right using that term. But right now, I think it's a bit too much.
I think if he comes out of this with only 1 point out of these 2 matches, then for sure. Up to this point, I don't necessarily see it. I think for me, I think a lot of that might just become because we got to have somebody to blame for this much talent not performing up to expectations. And I think a lot of times that's going to fall on the manager. We've talked about this before. I think too often the team just kind of is like, get the ball to Son, get the ball to Son, get the ball to Son, and just see what happens. But I mean, maybe that is on the manager. I don't know. I feel like it's always easy to go to the manager, and I feel like in this case that is there. To me, some of it's warranted, but at this point, what are you going to do? I don't think it would be wise to boot him right now. Who are you going to replace him with? And also, you're right in the middle of qualification at this point, so I don't necessarily
the manager gets like only a few days with the players each international break, and I think people forget that, and that kind of plays a bit on what you can do. You can imagine, like, if hypothetically they did get a new manager, that manager would have 1 training session with Son Heung-min before their next match. So is he going to be making him play like Tottenham Hotspur? Even if you ignore all the other factors, like the opposition basically put 10 men behind the ball, whereas when Spurs play, Son's at his best when he can get behind and get running at players.
I think as well, just my only 2 cents on it is, I can't remember the last time the Korean team, anybody liked a Korean manager. It's Shin Tae-yong was the last manager and everybody complained. Stileki was the one before, everybody complained. Bento's better than them. I know he's got his flaws. I'm not saying he's the best man for the job, but I just don't think people just like a moan, don't they? At the end of the day, that's how I see it. Every time the Korean every time it comes out, though, isn't it? Every time the squad comes out, it's just, it drags on, doesn't it? Everyone's got just the average age has to be 19. Everybody's like, what, it's
right.
I mean, that's the national team, isn't it? That's a national team for any country.
Yeah.
Not being a national team manager for any country, you're trying to cater to millions of armchair managers, including us sometimes. So I'm just saying, if he doesn't do well, probably should go. If he doesn't do well with this a talented bunch, doesn't do well, but he's got qualifiers to get through. Let's see the outcome of these qualifiers in my book.
Yeah. Let's see how they play in these ones, I think is what's going to be massive. And like you were saying, Steve, I hope you're right. I hope it is an entertaining match against Iran, because that to me, how they play in that game, the result's obviously massive in that one. If you win ugly, fantastic. But I think that's a match where there'll be a lot to talk about of how he sets the team up and how they play in that one.
Yeah, that's a match where, you can, it will be a bit different because the other team won't just put everybody behind the ball.
Right.
And you'll be able to use those players a bit. So it's going to be a bit better to watch for a neutral. Maybe if you're a Korean fan, maybe you'll hard to be racing a bit more.
Indeed. Matthew, anything else in the mailbag?
No, I believe that's it.
And if folks want to get more involved with us, how can they do so, Matthew?
Oh, well, if they'd like to get more involved with us, Ryan, they can do so on a variety of social media platforms. This includes Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, all at K-League United.
Not today.
No.
Yeah, not earlier today.
Not everybody today, yeah. Not at the time of recording. Just Twitter. Everything else is down. But you can also, if you'd like to interact with us more, you can do so on patreon.com/K-League United. This is if you want to support us and get more exclusive content. And this includes our So Rare features for people who are playing So Rare. This is our K2 champion tier. We offer weekly team news, including injury suspensions, transfer rumours and more. For the K1 champion tier, we also chuck in the predicted 11s for the K-League 1 games once a week, so you can get them as well. Full player interviews, videos, and podcast extras also go on there first, or sometimes exclusively as well. Tiers start as low as $1, but there's $3 and $5 tiers available, Ryan.
That's right, there are, Matthew. Thank you so much. I don't know why we're doing the Price is Right style announcers. You guys didn't have Prices Right anyway. Anyway. You did?
Yeah.
Oh, with Bob Barker?
No. I can't remember who we had.
I'm sure the prices are worse as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just all one big commercial, so in the end, it ain't that great of a show. But anyway, shows that are great, you can listen to them on Football Nation Radio down in Australia, including this one every Thursday. And if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, or wherever, and you leave us a review, you will be entered into this month's K-League kit contest. The Cecina and Edgar signed Daegu FC kit has been shipped away. That one is long gone at this point, but we'll have another one up there this week. And I'm going to dig into the stash. We'll get another vintage one out there. Maybe another goalkeeper kit. We'll see. If there's a team that you want, let us know in the comments, and we'll do our best to get them. But for the meantime, for Matthew Binns and Steve Price, I'm Ryan Walters. Thanks so much for watching.
공격 폭격기 김신우